This is the closing monologue, the soliloquy that ends Act 2, Scene 2. The scene in which Hamlet has encountered the one thing that makes him happy, that is to say, drama and plays. And even though in this speech Hamlet gives himself a really hard time, he berates himself for his lack of motivation to the point of comparing himself with an animal, and a dead one at that. Nonetheless, by the end of the scene, by the end of the soliloquy, he has come across a plan, and that plan is prompted by the players. It's a plan of action inspired by actors. All the odder since actors don't really live in the world of the real. Let's have a look at how those actors behave. He compares and contrasts himself with an actor because an actor can cry and appear to feel genuine feelings, whereas he, who has something to prompt him to those deep feelings, cannot express them either in weeping or in action. What's Hecuba to him, or he to her, that he should weep for her? And then he contrasts the cause, the motive, and the cue actually is a line that we get from F. Had he the motive and that for passion that I have. Now, by the end of the speech, he does come to a kind of a compromise where the actors can be a kind of means of action. It's a delaying tactic, but it's an ingenious one. He says that I have heard, note that hum by the way, as he's just suddenly toppling it once he's absolutely tortured himself with self-abuse. I have heard that guilty creatures sitting at a play have, by the very cunning of the scene, been struck so to the soul that presently they have proclaimed their malefactions. The idea is therefore that he will present the king with a representation, a mimesis, an imitation of his actions that will prompt his guilt and a manifestation of it. Now, that is again a kind of delay, as Harold Jenkins sums it up: no delay, no play. Or in this case, no play, or the play makes the delay, a play within a play. But it is a way in which he tries to summon up his motivation and become more like a human being. Now, this, I think, is a central idea throughout this speech. To what extent is Hamlet a proper functioning human being? A man with an individuality, a capacity to act. Now, this, as an AO3 point, was a preoccupation with Elizabeth's court. Everybody in Elizabeth's court needed to be aware of a book by Cicero called On Duties. And what that book was for was to work out how you should decide what the best course of action is based on philosophy, based on thought. Now, you could argue that it's the very thought processes that hold Hamlet up. In fact, he'd be rather better if he was more like an animal. But Cicero begins his book by saying, animals do not reason. They do not have a sense of the past and the future, whereas Hamlet does, or human beings do. And this is why Hamlet links in the middle of this very noisy middle of this speech the condition of being a coward, as in dishonourable, with being an animal. Am I a coward? Who calls me villain? You can almost hear him shouting at people in the audience, breaks my pate across, as in humiliates me by hitting me. And then he lists all the body parts by which he's going to be taunted. Then he compares himself to animals, or bits and pieces of them. But am I pigeon-livered? What an ass am I? And also, he is offal. He is food for kites. I fall a-cursing like a very drab, a stallion. The drab, by the way, is comparing himself to a whore. He's already compared himself to a rogue and peasant slave, but he's really going down in the kind of ladder of creation, down deep down onto the bottom of some kind of pyramid of needs. It matters very much that he's comparing himself to an animal. Elsewhere, he says that what use is reason? Why would God have given it to us if it is to, quotes, fust in us, unused? And where he as a human being has an apprehension of the before and after. So when we look at this speech, we look at whether or not a human being is capable of action. And he berates himself for being more like an animal, not even an animal, something that feeds animals. But after he's abused himself, talked about himself in the third person, and called himself a villain, he does rally. He actually goes right to the bottom in order to come back up to some kind of reason. Look at this, bloody, bawdy villain. He's piling on the adjectives in front of that word villain, which is a word he has used of Claudius. A man may smile and be a villain, a bloody damned villain. Remorseless, treacherous, as in working against the state. Lecherous, as in the extraordinary run there, treacherous, lecherous, not just acting against the state, but also acting as a depraved sexual being. So linking the idea of being a traitor to being a lecher, kindless, meaning almost without family as well as without kindness, a villain. Now, he comes up with all of those terms of abuse before settling on the idea of using a play. There's one last thought I would offer, and that is about Hamlet and action and madness. Remember that really his antic disposition is to help him in some way to achieve his revenge. Now, here he's got another ruse to achieve his revenge, to put on a play. Both involve acting. Both involve putting on a persona of who is therefore using it to calculate the next move. In the case of the madness, however, we are left with this question: how mad is he actually? Now, I'd leave it to you to decide how mad this sounds, but this almost self-loathing, this destructive comparison not only with animals and dead animals, but by implication with the man who killed his father, almost as if not avenging his father is like giving him some kind of a second death, almost, if you want to take it that far. He is so deploring himself that he does appear to be mad. And most of all, he appears to be mad when there is nobody to hear him or witness him being mad. So you could use this, if we're using it to take Hamlet's temperature on this journey, as a way of thinking, this is a man in severe mental distress.